Recent decades, disturbances became more abundant in both countrysides and urban areas. People drive more cars, kids play in the nature areas, boats passing by, and all we want to do on a nice Sunday is go outside and profit from the nature. The more fun we have outside, the more animals get stressed as well, as they are not yet habituated to neither us nor human disturbances. Some species, however, do well in both cities and rural areas. One of them is the coot. Our first research question is: do humans' disturbances have a significant influence on coot foraging behavior? And our second research question is: are there differences in fear for humans between urban and rural coots? As coots get in contact with humans and human disturbances, they experience a trade-off between both predator risks and food availability. This theory is called the landscape of fear. This trade-off is represented by the following graph, in which food availability is displayed on the x-axis and the degree of fear on the y-axis. The blue area represents the situations in which animals would go for the food and overcome their fear. We expect this relation to be linear or log-linear, but as we only deal in our experiment with a small increase in food, we will, for convenience, use a linear line. Following this theory, we expect that the coot in urban areas will spend more time foraging and resting and less time being alert than coot in rural areas. We expect that this is because coot in urban areas will experience less fear than coot in rural areas. This graph shows that we expect that coot in rural areas will need more food in order to be attracted to the bait and will approach the feeder less close than coot in urban areas. We found out that we can explore the difference in behavior between urban and rural coots by simply observing them and writing down what they are doing. For the second research question, where we research the difference in fear for humans between urban and rural coots, we will lure the coot closer with bait and then compare how close they come and what amount of food they need in order to be attracted towards us. The blue arrows on the map represent each location where one or more samples was taken. These are all located around Wageningen and Ede. We started with conducting a pilot study in order to find the food preference of the coot and if certain coot in urban areas were already habituated to certain food as they were supposedly fed by locals. The biggest problem, however, was how to measure the distance from us and the coot. Our first idea was to use a stick with a ruler attached to it so we could put the bait on a fixed distance from us. This, however, scared the coot away and was difficult to implement. Therefore, we found a new way, using a camera. Also, we wanted to know what the appropriate time to observe the coots would be. In literature, we found that we should observe the coot for 10 minutes, but during those 10 minutes, the behavior didn't change a lot. Therefore, we chose to only observe them for 5 minutes, which would enable us to have more data points. For the food preferences, we found that bread had the best and similar results in both urban and rural areas.
Coot is eating.
And importantly, it stayed floating. A short summary of how our experimental design looked like. First, we rode around looking for a coot. Then we observed the coot for 5 minutes and note down its behavior each minute. Next, we threw the bread, luring the coot closer, took a picture and determined the distance between us and the coot. In a power analysis, we found that we should have 30 independent sample points for both urban and rural areas, so in total 60 points. Eventually we got 34 in rural areas and 35 in urban areas. Day by day we did searching, observing, recording, approaching, feeding. We used the known distance of the feeder's jackets in order to convert the distance that the coot is from the feeder. Writing down all environmental factors that we thought would be important. Some days we encountered some over-enthusiastic visitors.
Tell me the duck story.
This is the result of manipulative part. We used independent sample t-test to analyze distance to feeder and number of bred pieces, with urban and rural as fixed factors. Looking at p-value, there is significant difference in distance to feeder between rural and urban areas. So, the coots in urban areas approached human closer than those in rural areas. In urban area, the average distance to feeder is 2.3 meters, while in rural area, the distance is 3.7 meters. Next, we try to find out what factors affect distance to the feeder. For the linear part, we did a Spearman bivariate correlation. We included amount and type of different disturbances, and distance to closest road and buildings. We included social composition of the coot, such as group size and number of chicks. We also took the presence of other bird species into account. For the nonlinear part, we did a univariate general linear model. In this part, we included weather, habitat, and vegetation type. The presence of pedestrian and distance to the closest road are the only factors that influence the coot that approach feeder. This is the result of coloration study. The graph shows observed behavioral differences between rural and urban coots. The x and y axis are behavior of coots and the percentage of time. The green bar represents rural areas, and the orange bar represents urban areas. The black line is the standard deviation. In this graph, we can see that coots spend around 35% of time foraging. The rest of the time, they swim or rest. We used univariate general linear model to analyze our data, with closest distance to the road and presence of pedestrian as covariates. In our manipulative study, we found that these two factors influence the habituation to human disturbances. Therefore, we included them as covariates. As fixed factors, we used rural and urban because it is the strongest factor influencing habituation to human disturbances. Looking at p-value, there is no significant difference between rural and urban observed behavior. Therefore, coot behavior does not differ between urban and rural area. These graphs represent power analysis for the manipulative and correlative study. It shows the power of 0.9 and 0.8, with 35 urban and 34 rural data points. The power is larger than 0.8, which means that we included enough data points to represent the population of coots. Both urban and rural coots experience the same degree of fear for human disturbances, as their behavior does not differ. Habituation to human did differ as urban could approach us closer than rural could. As we found that the distance to the closest road matters and significantly differs between rural and urban areas, with urban areas having shorter distance to the closest road. We found that it is the predictability of human disturbances that matters. The further the road, the more we deviated from normal disturbances, and the further could stay away and show more fear. The reason why our behavioral result differed from literature could be that our research is conducted during the spring, when there is no or little food limitation. This could explain why coots with chicks do not show a different attraction to the bait, even though these coots need to feed more amount of food. We could improve our experiment by including more seasonal variation and more variation in areas, because every area has different degree and type of disturbances.